Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 109. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Gil Arzola, the first winner of our 2021 Rattle Chapbook Prize. His book, The Death of a Migrant Worker, just came out to subscribers this week. If you haven't got it yet, you'll get it soon, but you'll get to hear and meet Gil tonight, which is really looking forward to that. Before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do. So click the like button and share, and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't been here before. For the regulars that are here all the time, you know the drill. But if you're listening for the first time, it really helps if you click something. So click something right now and help us out. Now, as always, we're going to go to some Poet Respond a little bit first, and we have two poets that we're going to be bringing in today. The first one is today's poet, Jennifer Reeser, and her poem was A Homeless Traveling Statesman about the hurricane. And let's call up Jennifer right now. Hey, Jennifer, I think you still have to push your camera button, but come on in. I hear ya. Are you there, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's I've got the button on, not seeing you.
Let's see. Well, try to push that camera button again. Let's see if that works, because it should come in. It worked a little earlier.
Yeah, it did, and now it's giving me the line across it. I don't know what the problem is.
That's okay. Well, we'll just do it by voice then. That's okay.
Okay.
So your poem today was A Homeless Traveling Statesman. And do you want to just explain a little bit about what it's about and what your experience is with evacuating too?
Yes, well, as you know, I live down here in Louisiana, and I've been through a lot of these. I've been through a lot of these evacuations. I've been through a lot of killer storms like this. I was here for Katrina, I was here for Rita, and now I've been here for Ida and Laura last year. And we've gone through mandatory evacuations, and also we've been given the option to stay during some of them. So I have mixed experiences with the hurricanes, and I was kind of on the flip side of this around this time. I've written a lot about these storms, and I have written a lot of persona poems as well, but this one was real. On Wednesday, my husband and I stopped at a gas station, and as the article cites that I paired with the poem, the gas situation is terrible down here in the Crescent City especially. And those people are desperate right now. They're without power, they're without gasoline, they're just in a very bad situation. Well, we pulled up, and my husband got out of the car and was crossing the parking lot when he saw a hatchback and a man get out from it who just looked despondent, and he said he just knew immediately what was going on. And he just walked over to him and he said, "Hey man, where are y'all headed?" And the man said New Orleans, and that just broke up my husband. So he said, "Hey, I know what you're going through." And so he gave him what he needed to get back with his family, I think, and it just really moved me and into writing this poem. It was it was all of a piece. It all came out at once.
Yeah. The best poems usually work that way. It seems it's kind of amazing, but to do it in a sonnet is really cool. But of course, you write formally all the time. And I think you sent a few sonnets this week, didn't you?
I wrote several of them. I was just really inspired. Like I said, I had children who came over from that way to stay at my house. They had to evacuate. And so I was really, concerned about my loved ones over there.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it because we have to evacuate all the time for fires. It's happened several times for us in a similar way. Like every few years or so, you have to evacuate. But it's so much easier actually with a fire. Because the fire only is limited to its own area and not an area the size of a state. So people have to evacuate. I mean, there's just so far you have to go, and everybody's evacuating at once. I mean, it's just I can't even imagine what it must be like.
Right. It's it's tough. It's tough, and the people down there in New Orleans, they're still just today, as a matter of fact, a poet, former Louisiana poet laureate, wrote me back about the poem that you put up on the Rattle website,
Hmm.
and this poet laureate said that it was just on the last of the battery power on the cell phone. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how long they expect it to take to clean up, but I'm sure, and get life back to normal. It's probably the other thing that's similar to fires is that people act like, once it's out of the news, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But the disaster
Right.
continues for so long afterward.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go ahead and read the poem?
Sure, I will. A homeless traveling statesman, you near and wave the wan evacuees enough to get them back to Jackson Square with bellies full of bagels and cream cheese. The sweat-soaked husband can't return your stare. Their compact packed to bursting with the most his wife and kids were able to finagle before the hurricane could hit the coast. But gas is choice as gold, and that cheese bagel is higher than when you and I were stranded in similar surroundings. We just hope his damage doesn't match what we were handed. The hardest part is how we watch him mope and pass the bland, non-Cajun styrofoam container through her window, heading home.
Yeah, just a wonderful sonnet, and our hearts go out to everybody down there. I'm glad you could avoid, the frightening area this time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, and I should say we're going to have you on as a guest when your next book comes out, whenever the publication date actually is. So really looking forward to that for having a full show with you, Jennifer.
I will love it. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, take care and talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Yep, bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see. So yeah, that was Jennifer Reeser with A Homeless Traveling Statesman, and I was trying to figure out. I don't know if you heard the sirens in the background. Speaking of evacuation and things, a fire truck just ripped by. So hopefully it's not heading to a fire. Anyway, yeah, so you can find Jennifer Reeser at her website, which is Jennifer Reeser. That's Jennifer, REESER.com. So check that out. Her next book, which I'm forgetting the title at the moment, it's coming out from Able Muse Press. She's also a translator of Native American poetry. And so let's move on to our second poet that we have. We have a Tuesday poem, too. It was really hard to decide which poem to publish on Sunday and which to do Tuesday. So I ended up just doing which one was submitted first, and it was only a day apart. So it was a difficult choice, but I just used that as a deciding factor because this one's really great, too, and really relevant right now. Let's call it Meredith Mason with her poem that she can share. Hey, Meredith, I hear myself in the background, so X out of YouTube if you haven't yet. Okay, I think you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. So it's great to see you. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. I'm trying to get my oh, there we go. Okay.
So I'm so glad you could join us and share this poem. Like I was saying, I don't know if you heard, but it was hard to decide which poem to do for Sunday and which for Tuesday because they're both extremely relevant, like in the news right now topics. And of course, do you want to explain what your poem is about and what inspired writing it? And it's a poem that's been, I guess, in progress for a little bit.
Yeah, so I wrote this poem over the summer, and a lot of it was just inspired mostly by, at the beginning, by this day being at the lake with my son, who was pretending he was a superhero, walking out into the waves and karate chopping the waves as they came, and feeling like he's like the big, strong, tough guy. And the whole time I'm holding his hand and making sure that he doesn't sink under the water. And it's just kind of one of those daily ways as a parent that we're constantly taking care of our kids and keeping them alive on a daily basis. And in this moment, at the same time, I have this cousin who's a kite surfer, and he was surfing back and forth and, jumping up 12 feet in the air. So there's kind of this little rumble of resentment about being this mom who's, in this role of care while the world is sort of going on around me. So I really did kind of write this poem as just describing that individual moment. But the whole time, this conversation about these heartbeat laws that we see in the news right now, that was kind of rumbling beneath the surface. And I think, as this week came, and I felt really this, it's hard, just identifying these emotions of grief, of feeling invisible as a mother. And I think that really, really kind of brought me to the point of realizing that I wanted to bring in this fuller picture of motherhood into this poem, that I didn't want it to just be this individual moment. I think I had this kind of hesitation to put a child and abortion in the same poem. But some of my process of this poem is realizing that I need to acknowledge that, a mother is that person providing that daily care. And a mother is also the person with individual needs who may need an abortion. And that was really, kind of this process of making this a more whole and honest poem.
Yeah. Well, we always talk about how that's the way, poetry works and should operate is a meaning-making sort of apparatus where you can try to figure out what, how to articulate and make sense of your feelings and your thoughts. And this poem, in such a succinct and poignant way, I think, put those thoughts together. Those complicated things that swirl around this topic. Do you want to go ahead and read it? It's
Sure.
Wave Man. We'll put it up on screen, but you have to read your own copy.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Wave Man. The bill sailed through the Senate and House, effectively banning most abortions in the state. Austin American Statesman, May 19th, 2021. Today, I held my son's hand as we waded into the lake, strong wind kicking up waves on the shallow water. I'm Wave Man, he said, karate chopping the swell. Face made him sputter, and I tugged him up so he wouldn't go under. Farther out, my talented cousin was doing something called kiteboarding. Back and forth, he traced graceful arcs across the surface, while high above, a taut red sail held the wind and pulled him on. Some say care comes easy to a mother. Go ahead and take it, like air. Tonight, I smoked one cigarette on the porch of the place I'm house sitting, inhaling once, like my lungs are my lungs.
Yeah, just a great ending and a turn in that poem that just has so much power to it. Thanks so much for sharing that, Meredith, and for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the chance.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, so that was Meredith Mason with her poem Wave Man, which will be featured on Rattle.com on Tuesday. And now we're going to go to our main guest, who I mentioned is Gil Arzola. I meant to warn you a little bit, if the stream cuts out. Our internet did go down once today. So if it cuts out, it was only briefly, and maybe, I'll be right back. So if it freezes, wait for me. I think they're having some kind of maintenance on the main server in town. But hopefully it's over. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to call up Gil, and then we're going to talk to Gil and his poem, The Death of a Migrant Worker. So hang on, and we'll be back in just a minute. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. As I mentioned, tonight's guest is Gil Arzola, the winner of the Rattle Chapbook Prize this year for his book. I'll put it on screen right here. It is The Death of a Migrant Worker. And just a powerful book of poems. Really wonderful chapbook to share with everybody. And a lot of feedback already on how much people have enjoyed this poem. Gil Arzola's first book of poetry, Prayers of Little Consequence, was published in 2019 by Passenger, who named him their Poet of the Year. His story, Loser's Walk, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize in 2018, and other work has appeared in several other magazines, Dash, Palabra, Whetstone, the Tipton Review, etc. And then, of course, like I said, his chapbook is The Death of a Migrant Worker, which is included with all issues of Rattle, if you subscribe, this fall. And here he is, Gil Arzola. Hey, Gil, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So, do you want to start us out with a poem?
Sure. Let me see. This poem is called Childhood Homes, and it's out of the chapbook. Where the bushes are now, a house once was. See there, where the branches are twisted together like skinny arms hugging air. You'd think it was one thing instead of two, until you look closer and follow to its roots. Right there, where the branches are highest, there was a window and a boy looking out. My life is passing. The snow melts. In another day it will become water and disappear into the ground. Over there, across the field, you can count 1, 2, maybe 3 trees I used to climb. Walk there, and you can ask each blade of grass on the way to tell you my name.
That was Childhood Homes from the new chapbook, The Death of a Migrant Worker. So, Gil, I'm kind of interested in how you got into poetry, because you're sort of coming in and sort of publishing up a storm all of a sudden, sort of after retirement, I guess. What was it what drove you to poetry in the first place?
I think, well, it wasn't poetry specifically at first. It was more like short stories and that type of thing. It was therapy. It was just a way. Although I don't know that I realized it at the time, but I've been writing since the 8th grade, and I never really thought about the publication part of it. I just kind of wrote, and when things came to me, I wrote them, and it just so happened that although I did have some stories published and some essays, that Passenger was the first actual, I guess, award that got me a little bit into it a little more. And then they asked for a book, and that's kind of how that happened. But it's just now I have time. I have more time, than I used to.
Yeah, and where did you work before? What was your job?
I worked for a utility company, and I spent 35 years there. So doing all kinds of things, but that's kind of what I did. And I wrote on and off. I say I dabbled. I didn't really do it seriously. I didn't take any classes. I didn't do anything like that. I just kind of wrote and saved things, and that's just kind of how that happened.
Well, do you want to set up what the book is about? Of course, it's about your parents, and in their travels, and how they ended up in Indiana, where you are now, and how and a way of containing and remembering their lives as they've passed away now. Do you want to just explain what their lives were, and how they came to be migrant workers and then not be migrant workers anymore?
Well, I think it was pretty typical then. Being raised in I was born in '52, so that was the '60s, and that was a typical thing that happened, not just in northwest Indiana, but everywhere. It was farming was labor intensive at the time. It's nuts. I don't know that it's not so much now, but it's definitely not as much as it was. So my father was raised in Bustamante, Mexico, which is just a little south, I guess, of Laredo, Texas. And my mother was raised in Robstown, Texas. So it was a normal thing, at least in their lives, to just head north. They would go in the back of trucks or in cars or however they could go, and they would go from farm to farm, kind of following the crops as they needed workers. And the story goes, although I didn't know the story at the time, my mom told me that my dad just kind of ended up sleeping in their yard in Robstown, Texas, as he was doing this traveling, and they met. That story I really don't know,
Yeah.
but they ended up in Northwest Indiana, married with I think 3 sons at the time, and he was asked to stay at the farm. I was 3 years old at the time, and so he stopped being a migrant then.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is the farm. We have family photographs, both on the cover and inside the book, a few. And these are actual family photographs on the farm.
Yeah.
And I know this is an amazing story to just be passing through and then meeting the love of your life and moving on together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. They again, it was just a normal type of thing, and we kind of melted into this I was going to say society, but that's not the right word. This town as migrant workers who were no longer migrant workers, and just trying to kind of fit in and all that kind of uh, stuff. I just wrote it. I didn't really talk about it very much. It was just something that I guess I've never been to therapy, so I guess this was my therapy.
yeah. Well, I think poetry really is. I think that's what poetry's purpose is to find that meaning that makes things make sense, and so we don't have to carry the luggage of those emotions with us anymore.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
well, do you want
Yeah.
to read another poem? Let's keep the poems coming.
Okay. This is called Soto. Old Mexican Soto was born with a gift for staying poor. At the end of every day, he would be 200 feet behind me in the mint fields, where we worked with 30 others pulling weeds. It was 1965, and weeding was a job for Mexicans and hillbillies who arrived every morning in a discarded school bus that was too old for hauling the hopes of school children, but capable enough to take us from field to endless field. Mexican women wearing straw hats gossiped. Young men whose youth still covered them like the sweat on their backs dreamt. Every morning, as if no bird could begin its singing, as if no sun would rise without us, we began together. When the clouds were still low and when the sun had just begun to melt the dew, we grabbed our hoes and picked a row as silently as sinners choosing a pew. Minding our chores and minding our own business, we dispatched the weeds and volunteers like unwelcomed guests, always beginning together. By 10 o'clock, old Mexican Soto was only a shadow behind me. When I turned, he was something brown against the green mint, and his hair was as black as the dirt between rows. Sometimes he'd stand and pull a red handkerchief from his back pocket, and with great ceremony he'd wipe his brow like he was erasing mistakes from a chalkboard. The handkerchief was the only part of him colored bright. The rest was brown and shades of that. Soto was round like a barrel, his brown skin worn like old leather, his chin coming to a point at the bottom of his long face. That's all I remember. 200 feet behind me, old Mexican Soto was still in the fields when I left, born with a gift for staying poor and dreaming of payday Fridays, cold beer, and quitting time. He stayed.
And that was Soto from The Death of a Migrant Worker. And so I think that you said earlier, we were talking before, that you grew up on the farm, right? Like, wasn't your house right there on the farm?
Well, it was a large farm. I mean, there were of course there were farms all over the place, but there was probably 3 or 4 very large farmers, and that's where we were. We were on one of them, and so we stayed in houses that he owned, um, and so I don't know. I guess we would call us tenants, but it was just part of the salary where he didn't pay any rent and electricity and that type of thing. So we just stayed there at those. Yeah. So and again it was typical. My father was he was of the mind that at 11 years old you should be helping uh, you know, pay the bills
Mm-hmm.
and feed the family. So in the summers, as soon as we were 11 and 12, we were in the fields and we were doing whatever they wanted us to do. That poem was about weeding fields, and at that time again, um, that was the typical thing that migrant workers did, and it was that irrigating fields. somewhat harvesting the crops. The potatoes were big then, and that type of thing. So yeah, I was raised there.
Yeah, and then and I think I read too that you were one of the only Mexican kids in the school when you went to school, right?
Well, again, there was probably three families that I recall
Mm-hmm.
that stayed all year long uh, in the community. Um, and yeah, I mean, as a kid, the last thing you want to do is be different.
Mm-hmm.
You want to kind of melt into the background if you can, and it was difficult, and there was some. I don't mean to say that the community was bigoted or prejudiced. There were some very nice, kind people, and that helped me a lot. But there were in those days there was a lot of bigotry, and it was pretty much a little more acceptable than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories I tell is, in the first grade when the teacher just assumed that we were going to be gone once the crops were, so they never paid much attention to us, or at
Mm-hmm.
least not to me. And I remember how angry I was at that, and also that coming in from recess, one of the stories that just I always tell, but it sticks in my head forever, is we would have to line up and wash our hands after recess, and she came to me and said, "You better wash your hands again because I can't tell when you're clean."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff just, uh, that kind of drove me to do what I did, and but yeah, that was the community I grew up in.
Yeah. Did it ever like get better over time? Was it more accepting
Oh
with
yeah, I
that
mean,
gradually?
again, I just, I was a typical kid, and my friends, I had good friends, popular friends, athletic friends. It was that was more of what was inside of me. It wasn't something that I shared with anybody, or but from time to time, something would happen that would remind me that, hey, uh, you're not like the rest of these people. You are different. And I remember a teacher too telling me one time, I think this was in the fifth grade, um, you're going to have to work harder than everybody else to get the same thing. And at the time, I didn't really understand what he was saying, but it finally, later on, it occurred to me, you're right, because you walk into a room and you're immediately judged as something, uh, without any proof. You're convicting
Mm-hmm.
without proof.
Yeah.
But it did get better. Yes, it,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely did.
Yeah, and I think I heard you tell another story about how the teacher like assumed you weren't in the good reading group, right? And then you used
That's
that as
one of my
motivation, really, right?
that's one of my go-to stories when I coach or talk to people. Yeah, she divided us up, and there was the redbirds and the bluebirds, and of course, what I always say is, we were young, but we weren't stupid. We knew what she was doing. At least I did. The bluebirds were the good readers, and the redbirds were the bad ones, and I was immediately in the redbird group, um, which again, I tell the kids that I coach, I could have responded a number of ways. One, I could have just curled up into a little ball, but instead I got angry. And I said, by the end of this year, I'm going to be the best reader in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And us. And it was just, it was just an annoying thing for her to believe that I just was not going to be as good a student, uh, just because I was a Mexican. It was very annoying to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great story though for coaching and for taking things head on, I guess. And maybe a little later, I think we should talk about coaching and sports and stuff. But let's hear another poem
Okay.
before we keep going. And I should say too, if anybody has any questions for Gil, leave them in the chat window on either Facebook or YouTube, and I will pass them along later in the show. And also, Gil, I hear, I don't know if people can hear at home, which just might be my good microphone or headphones, but I hear like a motorish kind of noise. Do you hear anything there?
I think what you hear is the tree frogs and the crickets
Oh, really?
outside the window. Yeah,
Interesting. I don't
yeah.
know. Well, that's strange because it sounds like a motor or a blender or something.
There's no motor or blender here, so
Okay. Well,
okay.
anyway, maybe it might just be in my headphones. Maybe the lines are crossed. It's strange. But anyway, let's hear the next poem that you want to share.
I just want to kind of preface this one a little bit. It's called My Father's Tools. Um, my father was a very simple man. He didn't own very much, but one of the things he really hung on to was his tools. He loved his tools. This was called My Father's Tools. Beneath a workbench built into a corner, beneath a workbench whose top is marked and cut by 1,000 things that needed fixing. Beneath a workbench as heavy as thunderclouds in July bringing rain, my father's toolbox waits for something to mend. My father is dead and can't fix anything now. 30 summers ago he came to my house and we fixed the brakes. He pulled at stubborn nuts and bolts and asked for hammers. His toolbox had everything we needed and we sweated together. We fixed the brakes. My father is dead and can't fix anything now.
And that was my father's tools from the chapbook. So I did want to talk about baseball, because I don't talk to many people who are sports people on the Rattlecast. And you were a softball coach for a long time, and you have a book on fast pitch softball pitching techniques.
Yeah.
And I just find that so interesting, because I always feel like baseball is such a poetic sport in the way that
It's the perfect game. It's geometrically perfect, yes.
In the way that it's reactionary too. Like when you're writing, you're sort of in this space where you're not being self-conscious. And the other sport I have to play now because I'm older is tennis, because that's all people play. And I'll go to golf later. But in tennis, you're rallying and you're like sort of thinking, and you can't stop your thoughts. But in baseball, there's something about the way that you just have to react so fast that there's a no thought kind of thing going on, which makes it a meditative type thing. And I don't know, can you just talk a little bit about what baseball has brought to your poetry? Because it's just interesting here, and coaching too, and work ethic and things like that, which I think probably come through in the writing process as well. How do those things relate?
They really don't. I got into coaching because of my daughter, and basically to protect her, because I thought she wasn't going to be very good. As it turned out, she was very good, and actually played in college. So, and then I just kind of got into it. I don't golf, I don't play tennis, I don't do anything else. But it was just something that I found. It was just something that I was good at, if I can brag on myself a little bit, and then just kind of followed her through as she went through high school, and actually coached her until she was 23 years old, and ended up coaching a couple of colleges, and even last year I coached at a college, but they were different lives, I mean, my life as a utility worker, and my life as a coach, and my life as a writer were entirely different. Although I think what coaching did for me is it took away some of the it made me a little less sensitive to what's going on around me all the time. I don't take things so as personal as I used to, and I think the kids did that to me. I really can't. I've written a few stories about baseball and softball, but I don't think they relate. I mean, I can talk to you about softball forever. I've been doing it 35 years, but it is extremely reactive, and it comes from a place you practice so much so that it becomes instinctive. That's part of the deal. And listening to these other poets that you had on before, where they seem to come up with a thought and actually write a poem based on that thought. I really don't do that. It just kind of comes to me, and I'm not sure that I have a subject in mind. I just kind of write. So I do get in a kind of a zone, and once I'm in that zone, it's a little tough to get out of it.
That's interesting. Let's see. So people on the chat are saying that they hear the little bit of a buzz too, and someone suggests it might be your computer fan. So maybe you can give your computer a nudge, or maybe put on those headphones if you have headphones. Let me see. I think that went away, so it was a computer fan. You're good.
Okay.
That went away. So something was like very subtly vibrating, and maybe it was picking up on the mic, but you couldn't hear. Anyway, I can take that out on the audio version for the podcast. But can you talk a little about that? That's fascinating, though, that what you said about getting into the zone being your writing practice, and not knowing where you're going to go, and then not being able to get out of the zone. I mean, both of those things are interesting. So say more about that. Like, what is the zone? Like, how do you get there, and what is it?
It's a little bit easier for me now, um, to sit down and write and kind of get in there and just kind of stay there and then get myself out and get myself in. But I don't know. It's hard to describe. I just kind of again, sometimes it's just a line. It's just a word or some memory. Like the childhood homes was just. I went back to look at the house where we lived at one point, and it wasn't there anymore. It was gone. So that kind of just nudged me in that direction. But again, I didn't start out, saying, I think I want to write about my old house. I just started writing and then, but I do rewrite. I don't want to sound like I'm, some kind of, you know, uh, medium or genius or anything. I rewrite constantly. So, again, even the chapbook, once I wrote it, I didn't look at it again, and then I looked at it again. I rewrote it, and then I rewrote it again, and rewrote it again. And as well as I do, when you edited it and had other people look at it, changes constantly. But again, it's just I don't know how to describe it. I just kind of get into that mode, and I'm just in there.
And how long have you been doing that? Like, is it only, since you retired and have been writing more frequently, or even when you were younger, did you feel that way about writing?
No, I think that when I was young, I was just talking to a nephew who wants to be a poet and has had no success at it. And I told him that when I was young, the problem was there was too much to say. As someone told me one time, I was trying to get a drink of water from a fire hose. There was too much going on. I could, just spilled out. I was everywhere. And now that I have a little more time, I think I have time to kind of settle into it. Where, when you're working and you're raising kids and, you got to mow the lawn, you don't have that kind of time to, and again, I never went to any classes. I wasn't, I don't have a Master of Fine Arts or anything like that. I just kind of write. I don't know anything about stanzas or rhythms or whatever else. I just kind of wrote. But now, I think it's quieter now that I have a little more time, and I can free up 3 or 4 hours of just, writing.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, because that was what, the whole point of Rattle when it was founded 25 years ago, was to have a place for poets who weren't, in MFA programs and weren't going through all the classes and having access to all that stuff and then having their writing style shaped by it, but just the idea that poetry is a central thing to human experience, and it's really important and has value for everybody. And it doesn't matter what degrees or what schools you went to or things like that, or how many places you've been published. And so, so it was really great to read your book, which was so well written in such a clean and sort of raw type way, which is exactly what we always look for. I even said, like, this is a Rattle style book as we were looking at the manuscript. And so
education gets in the way sometimes. You begin to think too much about what you're doing. I among my other things I did was play guitar. And one of the best guitar players I ever met went to school and came back a worse guitar player because now he was thinking about it too much. He had learned too much, and he wanted to keep everything within the parameters of what he'd learned rather than just playing. And so, and poetry to me, Tim, is just you take from it what you want. It's like art. I'm not like I was telling somebody the other day, E. Cummings, I think he's a good poet. He's a great poet, but that's not my thing. That's just not but that doesn't mean he's not a good poet. It's not my thing. Just like I don't really care for hard rock. That's just the way it is. So you take from it what you want. And if you don't get anything out of it, well, go read somebody else, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a great attitude too, and it reminds me of the way that a lot of times there'll be, when we accept a poem to publish it, there'll be like a certain section that feels off, and I'll say like, oh, I think we need to revise this section. Like something doesn't feel right about this. Can you we'll accept this poem for the magazine, but we got to work on this. And then it's happened many times where they send me the original draft, and that was the stanza that was heavily workshopped at their MFA program, and had all those sort of ideas imposed upon it, and it became sort of this like, stew of ideas instead of the heart of the poem, and that's right. What I think people are loving about your chapbook, is that the heart sings through without that kind of thing getting in the way.
Well, thank you.
Do you want to read another poem? What do you want to read next?
This is called "A Poor Woman a poor Mexican woman makes supper. And this is kind of my mother. She measures nothing. She tosses flour like confetti, grabs like hope handfuls of this, like dreams a pinch of that. The kitchen smelled of tortillas, rice, and beans when I was young. The smell came through the rusting brown screens of migrant camp cabins and found us outside. It smelled of hope simmering. It smelled of luck run out.
That was a poor Mexican woman makes supper, and that's a poem about your mom. And one of the things I was hoping to do, because one of the things that makes the book of poetry work so well here, I think, is that it feels so intimate. Like, it feels like you're actually speaking to your parents and saying like what you needed to say in a very personal way, but in a way that's also like, it doesn't give us their whole stories. We get this really intimate sort of conversation between your parents and yourself. So can you just explain, sort of broaden a little bit about what your parents were like? What were your mom and dad like?
My father was an intelligent man, but he wasn't an ambitious man, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, he was a hard worker, but he was of the mind that you should be grateful for what you have, and that was enough. And my mother probably was a little more ambitious, but she was a woman of the times when, a woman stayed home and cooked and didn't say a lot and didn't have much opinion and so on. And she, just as an example, she never drove. She didn't never learn to drive. But growing up, there were 9 of us. Okay, there wasn't a lot of hugging going on. There wasn't a lot of discussions about current events or how you doing in school and that kind of stuff. It was just kind of living life. It wasn't until we had gone, that I had gone actually, and that I got to know them a little better. But my mother was as true a Christian woman as there's ever lived. She believed and lived and walked the walk forever. My father, I think he was Christian long enough to get what he wanted. You know what I mean? I mean, he's kind of like me, But anyway, they were good people. They were just hardworking, simple people. They weren't, and that's the other thing, people pass that way through this world constantly, that don't make a fuss, and we don't build statues to them. And but they were just normal people who worked hard and raised good children.
Mm-hmm. And what do you? I mean, you have siblings. What do they think about the book and about you writing about your family? Do they talk? Do you talk about it? Has it opened up things for them or not?
I hope they see that, what I'm trying to do. I haven't talked in depth with them. An interesting thing is it was like 2 separate families. I would say the 3 older brothers had very different lives than the younger ones. Things changed. They became more acclimated and were more of accepted in the community and that kind of thing. So they didn't see the same things we did. They didn't go into the fields at 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to do that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I don't know. I hope they like it. Haven't really talked to them about it. I'm going to write it anyway. So.
Yeah. Let's hear another poem. I want to make sure we get through these.
Okay. This my mother passed away, and because of COVID, there was only a couple of people go in her rooms. So I was in the room with her one day, and she was sleeping and waking up and so on. But when she woke up one time, she just kind of stared at a wall as if she saw something in the wall. And so this is called My Mother Stares at Walls. I don't know what she sees, my mother who is dying. Her eyes open and she stares at walls. Maybe this is how it goes. After 89 years, I think maybe the wall becomes a movie. The windows turn into mirrors. And so she stares. But I don't know what she sees, my mother who is dying, what she feels or remembers, or how she adds it up now that it's time to do the math. When sleep comes, I want to ask, what do the dying dream?
That was My Mother Stares at Walls, which kind of gets toward the other heart of the book, I think, is just what is a life? You know, I mean, that kind of big question is what it seems like you're asking throughout the book, and about yourself too, as well as your parents. What do you think about what life is and what we're here to do? Those are the kind of things that sort of move through your mind as you're reading this book.
Well, I am kind of a nerd in that regard. I read a lot, well, my best friend is a doctor, and so we talk about this type of stuff a lot. But two things have come to mind right away. Either everything we do is important, or none of it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're either all connected or we're not connected at all. And whether there's a God or not a God is not for me to say. I use the tools I was given. I can provide no proof. So I think that the best way to put it is if we can make this place a little better than what we found, then that has to be the purpose. Just try to do a little bit of good. Or like I can't think of the writer now, but if you can keep your head when all those around you are losing theirs,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's maybe the true test. In all this chaos noise, if you can retain a little bit of humanity. So as I go through here, I'm just trying to note a couple of lives who did leave the planet a little better than they found it.
Yeah.
And again, not that they're special or any more special than anyone else, but they were my parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a question here from Peter King Badger O'Donoghue, who says, "Can I ask Gil about class in poetry? Here in Ireland, poetry is very much a middle-class sport. All the terms and conditions, the references of place and things, and food and ideas and ideals are middle class. It's hard for a working-class person... let's see, lost the thing. It's hard for a working-class person with different points of reference to be heard. We have to be louder, more insistent, and that can be tiring. We are kind of Ginger Rogers doing everything just as good, but backwards and in high heels, whilst the Fred Astaire's just waltz on in. Is it the same in America?" So that brings up a really interesting question too. Just how is somebody who hasn't been through the programs and hasn't, and starting out later in life publishing, how have you been met, and how does class feel to you as it relates to poetry? Because that's something that does always bother me. And again, one of the things we set out at Rattle to try to do differently by not judging people based on that whatsoever.
Well, again, I don't really care too much about that. I don't write to be published. If obviously I send things away to be published, but if they're not, I don't think I'm upset or think any less of what I've written. I really don't. I think that might be why I don't join writers groups. I don't do that type of thing. I don't want to sit there and dissect your stuff or my stuff because it's stuff. And again, like going to an art museum, you take what you want from every picture that you see, and if you don't see anything there, then go on to the next room. But I don't think of it as a class thing. I don't think that getting a Master of Fine Arts makes you a better writer necessarily. And I do think that someone who's I was going to say suffered, but that might not be the right word. Somebody who's kind of lived less than idyllic life might be a better writer, just because it is therapy. You're putting it down because there's something happened to you, and you're trying to get it off your chest so you can keep moving, so you can keep your head about you. So I'm sorry for that in Ireland. I didn't know that, but I don't really think about that here.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I always notice just here is that there's so many things like writers' retreats and things where you can, if you have the money to go for like 2 weeks and don't have to work, you can go meet with some fancy writers and in a big group, and it's such an experience that if you can't afford it. And then the other thing is the submission fees, which we don't have because I don't agree with that kind of thing. I don't think there should be any kind of barriers to publishing because we're nonprofits after all. But those are the two things that worry me just about, one of the beautiful things about poetry is that there's no academic bar to access it, that everybody has a voice, a language that they speak, and everybody can write it down, and there should be very little in the way. And so anytime there's anything in the way, it kind of stands out.
Isn't it? isn't sports kind of the same way? I mean,
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
softball with the travel teams and all that stuff, and they price they price kids out of it. Um, Again, I don't know that I would enjoy those retreats. I don't know that I would enjoy sitting around talking to some famous writer. I'm glad he's famous and I'm happy for him, but that doesn't mean anything to me necessarily. I'll read his book. I cannot tell you how many poetry books I have, Tim,
hmm
and I read them, and maybe they've won awards and been acclaimed, but I don't particularly like it. So I just go on to the next one and see. I'm sure there are a lot of very talented poets that aren't published at all. But so again, maybe it's a luxury for me that I don't really care whether I'm published or not. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Well, I
yeah.
think that's just the perfect way to look at it. So I love hearing you say that. Um, so what do you do as far as like, learning how to approach a poem, and what do you read that sort of informs the way you write? Like, how has your schooling been since you haven't been through any kind of programs or anything?
I think it's just been reading. I loved to read. Of course, we couldn't afford books, so I spent a lot of time in the North Judson Public Library. I'll just give them a little plug here. But so I would go there and I would just spend hours reading, and I just always loved books. My house is full of books. I have trouble letting them go, um, and so my education's all been reading.
hmm
I just read, and when I get something that I like, I just I'm sure I've been influenced by some poets. Um, Stafford, is that correct?
hmm
Can't think of it. Yeah, I really like his stuff. Nye, I can't think of her name right now. Um,
Naomi, Shio.
Naomi Nye,
Yeah.
I like her a lot. Um, those two, but I think I'm more Robert Frost than I am E. E. Cummings. I just like poetry that doesn't try to hide a meaning. Tell me what you're trying to say, and you know, maybe I can take something out of it.
hmm
Not that there's anything wrong with that other part. If that's what you like and that's your thing, then God bless you. It's just not mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that your poems are very storytelling oriented, but then you said that you don't really know what you're, setting out to write as you start. Um,
No,
does the story sort of come to you as you're going into the poem? Is that how that works?
yeah, and not to get too mystical, but sometimes they just come in my I'm half asleep and I just think it just comes to me and I just write it down in a little note, and in the morning I hope it reminds me what I was trying to say. Um, there was a poem that a passenger published that was that way. It just came to me. Why My Mother Believes it's called, but it just kind of came to me. But no, I just start to begin. I mean, I think when I write a story or an essay, I do have a certain a thought in mind, something that I'm going to say. But and that might be why the poems are kind of like storytelling,
hmm
because I began at first not poetry but writing kind of stories
Yeah.
and essays about
Hmm.
things that had happened.
And why do you think you shifted to more writing poetry?
Well, I really haven't shifted more. I've just not been published as
Mm.
much in that. So I have a lot of writing that hasn't found a home yet. But again, uh, that's just the way it is. Poetry just seemed to be where I landed and was published first.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's hear the next one. Why don't you do the raking of leaves, and then we'll move on to your other book too, which I want to cover a little bit.
okay. The raking of leaves. Every day the colors grow softer, the days more sympathetic. I've gathered all my things and put them into boxes. That will make it easier for you to carry out. I understand the way things end now, why leaves change colors, the reasons that they fall. 68 times I've watched it happen, and now I imagine what I can't see. I remember what I can't have again. The cleaning up is all that's left to do, the raking of leaves. Orange and red, yellow and brown, collected and made into piles, where the wind will take them eventually and leave us to marvel at the patterns they make.
And that was the raking of leaves, kind of poem about poetry, really, and why this book is written. It felt to me. Um, did you know that you were going to write a book about your parents? Did you know, or did that just come out naturally too?
No, I didn't know. Again, it just came out naturally, and I think when I submitted it to you, I submitted it with that first with the cover picture,
Hmm.
which I wasn't sure if that was a no-no or not, but I liked the picture a lot, and uh, and it just kind of began. But no, there was no thought of, hey, this is going to be about my parents. It just just kept writing, and that's kind of how it worked out. It just go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you included two other poems from your previous book, which I haven't had a copy of it and didn't have a chance to read. So can you introduce like what that book was about and how is it different from the subject matter of the death of a migrant worker and how that
It's
came to be too?
Well, again, Passenger called me and told me that I was their poet of the year, and I think what that entailed is they were going to publish, I want to say 6 poems or something in one of their issues, and then from that they wanted to see more, and from that was born a book. The book is a little more about lots of things, uh, but a lot of poetry about growing up Mexican American and my parents. So. There's kind of a little bit of both, uh, you know, just other things and that. Um, they were very nice to me and very kind in publishing this book. So yeah, I don't know that there's a theme in that one necessarily.
Hmm. Well, do you want to read one of the poems? I don't know which one you wanted to read first.
Father,
Sure, yeah.
okay, write this down. My father left nothing on this planet. The sweat off his brow falling like a single drop of rain raised the dust when it fell and was invisible a moment later, joined to something no argument could change. He planted some corn once. It has become something else too. Even those who were there have trouble remembering how he walked, where he was headed. There's no way to track him now, no footprints to follow or sign of what was important to him, what mattered. Whispered away like milkweed floats away in a breeze, whispered and whispered again, softer and softer, until finally you hear nothing.
And that was Father from Prayers of Little Consequence, Gil's first book that just came out just 2 years ago from Passenger Press. There's a question from Jennifer Reeser, who's still watching from the very beginning. And she says, I love Mr. Arzola's actual physical layouts on the page as well. She says they're nice and visually appealing. I guess it's not a question, but it's a comment that leads me to a question. How do you decide to lay out the poems the way you do? Because you do move lines around the page, and it feels very intuitive. Is there any method to that madness?
Intuitive might be a great word for that. Um, Maybe it's I don't know. They just feel right. I mean, that's not a good answer. I'm sure that's not what she was looking for. It just if it doesn't look right to me as far as just glancing at it, this line needs to move this way or that way. Um, I just write it down and try to get it to where it's. I don't know. I mean, again, it's just visual to me how it appeals to me visually without reading it. Does it look like something you'd want to read? I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. Again, I wish I was trained better. There's probably a phrase in some class that tells you how to do that, but I don't know what that is. So, sorry.
No. I don't know that there is a phrase for moving around the lines like that. But everything.
Sometimes I want to put them by themselves. I'll put a line by itself because I think that line's important.
Hmm.
I do that. I see, and sometimes I want one word to lead you into the other.
Hmm.
So I do think about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. And I always wonder about that. I did go to college and I remember arguing with a professor of English about poetry and saying, because she wanted you to. I think it was a Robert Frost poem or something. She wanted you to tell you to write an essay about what Robert Frost meant. And I said, well, the only person who knows what Robert Frost meant is Robert Frost. I don't know what he meant. I can tell you what I think he means. Of
Hmm.
course, I didn't do well in that class, obviously. But I just kind of write. I don't really
Hmm.
have a.
Do you know what you mean? Like, do you sort of have an idea of what the poems are about all the time, or is it some things remain a mystery to you?
Yeah, well, let's go back to the raking of leaves. You thought it was about what? you said something.
About the way that we organize a life, I guess is how I'd put it. And then it seemed like the raking of leaves, like piles of leaves, could be almost like poems. And putting this book of poems together felt like that.
Well, in my mind, the raking of leaves was all the days of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was putting all my life together in one pile, and then how it would just be blown away
Yeah.
by the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was talking about. So again, are you wrong or am I wrong? No, no. You take from it what you want, or what you feel, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We have let me ask you too. What else are you working on? Like you said, you have piles of things. Do you have a novel? Your stories? Are you still working on publishing things out? Like, what are you going to do next?
Well, right now I'm trying to find a home for a group of essays, uh, essays slash stories. So they're partially true and partially uh, fiction, and I'm just trying to group them together in some manageable way. Being a softball coach, I have a group of stories about sports.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, things that have happened. Coaching and watching sports. I have another group of stories just about, uh, again, being Mexican American and things that happen there. But my wife insists I have a novel in me. I don't know that I do, and I'm not sure where it is because I can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's because my attention span isn't good enough to actually uh, write a 200-page novel. But again, I'm not going to be too concerned about it. I'm just going to let it kind of come. I sent it off occasionally. I just sent that group of essays off. Um, I guess what I need is an agent to just take care of all that for me because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, maybe an agent's watching. If any agents are watching, call up Gil.
Yeah, call me. I need help.
Well, let's close it out with one last poem, Gil. I think you want to read the other poem from the book, or from
Yes, this
Prayers.
is from the Prayers of Little Consequence. It's called Behind the Barracks. My father loved three sports. Only two were real, and one was against the law. He loved the Cubs, Ernie and Billy in the disaster of '69. Friday nights he squinted into a 12-inch Motorola at Gorgeous George and Dick the Bruiser and yelled into it as if you could holler loud enough to chase away fate. And on Sunday afternoons behind migrant barracks he stood in a circle of brown-skinned men watching cockfights. On Sunday afternoons beneath clouds like soft white feathers, the fields were quiet except for the echo of shiny brown faces yelling into its grain, and the dirt the color of blood from a rooster with no choice but to fight.
Yeah, just another great poem. I mean, just so much is contained in such in pretty short poems. Just beautiful stuff, Gil, and just great talking to you. It's been a lot of fun. Everything I hoped it would be. Thanks for being a guest today and for publishing this wonderful book with us.
Well, thank you for publishing it, and again, hopefully we'll get to meet someday.
Yeah, definitely. My pleasure when we do. Thanks, Gil.
Okay.
Good night. So that was Gil Arzola with his book, which all subscribers to Rattle are going to be getting. If you haven't gotten it yet, it's right here. This is let's see. This is the death of a Mexican, or the death of a migrant worker by Gil Arzola, and then of course we have more photos of Gil and his family throughout the book. Just a beautiful collection. That opening poem, which we published online a couple days ago, is one of my favorite too. And then his other book was Prayers of Little Consequence. So you can find the chapbook, The Death of a Migrant Worker, by subscribing to Rattle. So all you have to do is go to rattle.com and subscribe. If you don't have a copy yet, it comes free with a subscription. For Prayers of Little Consequence, you can find the book at Passager Books. That's Passagr, passagerbooks.com. So find it there, pick up copies of each, and you'll really love these because these are just wonderful books, and Gil's a wonderful guy. So great to talk to him, and thanks everybody for joining in. Now we're going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to go to open lines. Now the prompt for this week was right here. The prompt was write a poem. Oops, hang on. Come on. There you go. Write a poem set in a time period of at least 100 years ago. So that was the prompt for this week, if anybody has one. And you can also send poems about anything else you'd like, though. You can send poems for Poets Respond, news poems about current events. You can send poems that you've recently had published and want to share. Anything you'd like to do, feel free to share on the open lines. I'll tell you how to do it right now. It is right here. So email your poem first, if you haven't yet, to openmic, that's openmic@rattle.com. Then call in over Skype or the phone to read. Over Skype, send me a chat message to Rattle Poetry, all one word. That's Rattle Poetry, all one word. Over the phone, it's 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. And just call and let it ring a few times, then hang up, and I will call you back. Those are the two ways you get on the call list. Just pick one or the other, and we'll get you online. So I'm going to take a quick break, like I said, stretch my legs. I will be right back. You can refill your beverages and all that stuff in just a moment. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience as I get things set up. To be honest, I was trying to see if I could edit my poem in time to share my poem for the prompt. And in 30 seconds in between the break isn't enough time to edit. I sort of cranked it out and right before the show started. And it wasn't quite done. Like the ending didn't quite click. And I thought I would share it if I could find, in the 30 seconds I had, if I could finish up that last line, but I couldn't finish up that last line. So I'll share my history poem next week. And Megan doesn't have a poem either, so we're just going to go straight to open lines. We're both kind of a little brain foggy from reading all the contest submissions. Is it the Rattle Poetry Prize results are going to be announced September 15th, and that is a lot of poems to read. And it's hard to write your own when you have so many poems swimming in your head. Normally, 4 hours a day of reading we can deal with, but when you have to do like 8, it gets kind of mushy up there for writing your own stuff, at least. So let's see who would like to share poems first. Let's call up Richard Westheimer. Who else do we have? Angela Gartner said she would like to share. Nivita Karthik asked us to read a poem for her, so we'll do that. Julian Matthews is here, so the usual gang. Thanks so much for joining me and sharing your work with us as always. Let's see. Colette O'Donohue says she has a poem. She emailed me. So Colette, email me the actual poem, and then you can either call in or just say that, can you read this for me? I'd be happy to read it for you as well. So either way, where you emailed it, I got that message. Just include the poem and tell me what you want me to do, or call in through Skype. Because I think you said earlier you're in Ireland, so it would have to be Skype, I think, because the international call would be expensive. Anyway, let's call up Richard Westheimer first. I think he was the first person to ask. We'll find him right here. Good evening, Mr. Westheimer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I was wanting more talk about baseball because when baseball returned last year, I first of all I couldn't find a damn radio, and baseball on the radio is
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
I
classic.
didn't have a radio, but yeah, for me baseball, like innings are like verses and pitches are like words. It's like all these stories unfolding and adding up to a season. So
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's so much, I don't know, there's so much rich metaphor there. And there's some great baseball poems, but there really aren't that many. I mean, there's, I don't know. I mean, I can think of a few, although I'm drawing a blank on the one I'm thinking of right now. B.H. Fairchild has a great one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's my favorite baseball poem. And we've published some at Rattle. But I mean, the intersection between sports fans and poetry fans isn't that much of a Venn diagram overlap, I guess. You don't get as many poems about baseball as you might otherwise.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, great poems and great interview. I loved getting the chapbook and that opening poem. It's just like,
yeah. I mean,
something.
Yeah, and definitely if you enter a manuscript for everybody out there, if you enter a manuscript, put a poem like that at the beginning, because then you're like, whoa, it clears out that brain fog I mentioned earlier, and you are definitely locked in when you read a poem like that.
Right.
So what do you want to share with us tonight, Richard?
I did email you a little revised version of my Poets Respond poem.
Okay, is that the Wolf Hunt?
No, that was from a couple weeks ago. If there's time, I'd read that one too. But it's the incomplete and partially factual portrait of my mother that is entirely true.
Yeah, I remember reading this in Poets Respond this weekend. So explain what this is about, and there'll be time for the other one too. I think we're gonna have a pretty short show today because Gil had really short poems, and then I don't see a whole lot of people on the open lines. We definitely have time to just share whatever you want.
Good. Well, good. I appreciate the information. So this one, motivated again by the Texas abortion, sort of echoing the Fugitive Slave Act, really, with bounties, enforced by people, and it's very difficult and fraught for a guy to write a poem about this. But it really, what unfolded for me was my mother and her activism, and this very sort of society woman who got down in the streets to protect others' right to choose. So that's basically this one.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead? I have it up for everybody.
Sure. An incomplete, partially factual portrait of my mother that is entirely true. This is the story of my mother who died with a pen falling from her hand, a check on her desk, paid to the order of those who would put women in charge of their own choosing. This is the story of my mother who chose to birth me, thought she might not, knew her money could buy a very quiet procedure, and I'd have been fine with whatever she chose. And what she chose was to place newborn me in the arms of hired help so she could nail protest signs to staffs, hold them high as she rallied with whoever would link arms with her, whoever would join her to fend off heckling men and their spittling mouths, men who raged at women as they walked from bus stop to clinic, from parking lot to doctor's door. My mom wrapped her arms around those sisters, was hit with dribbles of shouters' spit, came home each night to a maid-cooked meal, read Saul Bellow under a shaded lamp, pored over the local affiliate's finances, watched the local news at 11, went out the next morning, picketed the State House, raised her voice so the hired help, too, could have a choice. If she were alive today, my mom would march her 100-year-old self to Texas, hold the hand of every woman and girl, choosing to do what Mom didn't do back in '53. She'd whisper mother love into fearful girls' ears and say the proper lady's version of fuck you to any prissy busybody who'd sue her. This is the story of my mother, and I wonder what would she would she think she made the right choice to give birth to a man who sits on his hands at a time like this?
Yeah, great poem. It makes me really want to meet your mother. An incomplete, partially factual portrait of my mother that is entirely true. Thanks for sharing that, Richard.
And you said there is time for another?
Yeah, go ahead with the other one, too.
Yeah. So I have The Wolf Hunt, which was from a couple weeks ago, and it's sort of attempting a little more formal stuff occasionally. And the basic story was in Wisconsin, they were wrangling over how many wolves they could hunt and the reintroduction of wolves into the environment, and who is for it and who is against it, hunting and taking them out. So that's the sort of context.
Yeah.
So this is The Wolf Hunt. He hears the rain before the rain hears the rain. The patter on distant leaves rouses the wolf. The collie cocks his head, hears baying from the hills, paws the floor, noses the door, dreams he hunts with the wolves. A sheep bleat reaches the rancher's ears, then another cut off. The old man counts his coins, knows he can't abide more wolves. Blood soaks the ground. The air is sodded with wet wool and musk. The alpha circles. He snouts the still warm gut, wolfs down the bowels, bares his teeth, drips liverous bile from his tongue. The betas snap their jaws, wait their turn at the wolf feast. The Ojibwe word for corn is mandamin, which means wonder. White tails browse knee-high stalks, dart to the woods, wary of the wolf. My hunter buddy shoulders his .223, sights the scope, and sees one more trophy mounted on his wall, the stuffed corpse of a wolf. Ecologists from downstate count predator and prey, survey the flora, speak up in meetings, defend the wolf. Ma'ingan means wolf, means the one to show us the way. Ojibwe, walk with the wolf, know the wolf, do not fear the wolf, are the wolf. I am the hunter, the corn grower, the rancher, the ecologists. I do not know the wolf. Oh, I wish I was the kind of man who hungers to howl with the pack, who knows he has shown the way and walks with the wolf. I am not.
Thanks for sharing that, Richard. Do you know anything about the wolf situation just broadly in the country? Because I was thinking, I don't really know much about it. Like, how many wolves are in the United States, and like in what states are they? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I of course read up on Wisconsin, and I don't remember the numbers, but it is reintroduced, and it's reached a threshold where they think the wolf community is sustainable, and there's lots of, but not abundant. And I do know in areas where they've reintroduced wolves that deer populations are reduced, and streams start running more, more not running in their banks rather than running out of their banks because the deer strip the banks. And but I don't know. I do know that it's a sustainable number, and some ranchers. And the other thing is they don't cause a lot of damage, but they cause a lot of damage every place that they do damage.
Yeah.
So they'll take out 30 sheep on one farm, but all the sheep farms in Wisconsin suffer more losses from dogs, from domestic dogs.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And then I wonder too, like, do wolves attack humans very often? Is there a danger to the population? Because here where we are, people talk about reintroducing wolves, which in my opinion is fine. But then they also talk about reintroducing brown bears, and I do not want to introduce a California brown bear.
I'm not a promoter of enough. Yeah. I'm not pure enough to want brown bears. Yeah. But the wolves, evidently, and the more I read about the Ojibwe, that this is not sort of hyperbole that they walk with wolves and they have some sense of kinship with the wolves. This is very much. Not viewing the wolves as threats.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. Both good poems. Thanks for sharing both, Richard. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tim. Good to see you.
Yep. Good night. Okay, so there's Richard Westheimer with The Wolf Hunt, and then the poem about his mother. And let us see. I think we're going to do Angela Gartner next because she was the first person to ask. And then we do, let's see. We have a poem from Colette too. So I'll read the poem from Colette after Angela. Let's see. Okay, let's call up Angela and see what she's got.
Tim.
Hey, Angela, how you doing?
Good. Oh, let me turn you off here.
No problem.
Can you see me?
I can, yeah. Good to see you today.
Oh, okay.
So what is it that you wanted to share?
Oh, okay. So I have a poem for Poets Respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a prompt poem, but it's kind of funny. I'll tell you about that.
Okay.
But so Carolyn Shoemaker is basically she passed away at 92. It's from a New York Times article.
Mm-hmm.
And she was basically hunting, so basically her and her husband Gene was a planetary geologist. And after her kids went, left for college, and she was just kind of a homemaker. She was a teacher, but then, she just pretty much became a homemaker. Her husband she wanted something compelling to do, at the age 50. And she's like, I really want something to do. So he gave her a choice between something with geology and looking through the telescope to find comets and asteroids. And she chose that and became one of them, world renowned at this. Even a comet named after her, and a researcher with her. But it all kind of just started with her husband, but she really grew to really love it. And even after his death, which she died, it was terrible. They were in a head-on collision in Australia, looking at these craters, and he died. I think it was in the 90s, and then she carried on their work. So it is kind of a love story, but I kind of just wrote it about her because at first she was oh my gosh, I can't stay up all night, and but it turned into this thing that and I mean, who would have thought a cool second career is to look to the skies and look for comets and asteroids? Because I think, I don't know, even since I was little, maybe because all the movies you see and stuff, but you think, and obviously the dinosaurs too. What they say, what happened to dinosaurs? She was one of the people kind of looking up and making sure that seeing all these things, that these big rocks that could be hurtling towards us. So
yeah, it's fascinating. It was one of those, I mean, the reason why I love sharing these Poets Respond poems, on an open mic, is that there's so many fascinating poems and stories that come in every week I get to learn from. And this was one of them. I didn't know, I knew, I'd heard of Schumacher-Levy, the comet, but I never knew any of the backstory about the Carolyn who found it. And so this was fascinating to read. And it was a cool poem too. Do you want to go ahead and read it? I'll put it up.
Yeah. Filling time with hunting comets and asteroids. For Caroline. The birds are chirping morning songs, and you are going to bed. The kids are gone. You needed a hobby. A retired teacher climbed to the top of a mountain to look up in the black and gray shades of the night, searching for floating rocks headed towards planets in a rage to save us from a wild universe.
Yeah, great little poem and a great story. People should definitely look up the article, and the bio of Carolyn Schumacher. It's just really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I submitted to Poets Respond, but I'm really just happy that I got to write a poem about it and to learn more about her. And I think it is true, when I look up to this, because I love looking to the stars. I'm always every night we go on our, dog walk, and I'm looking up and point out the constellations to my husband, who've heard it a million times. But it's one of my favorite things to do. And, you see the planes, and you just wonder if you're going to see something, magical. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and we lose so much too with the light pollution, which
yeah, I know.
unfortunately,
Sometimes it's only grayish white.
yeah.
You don't get to see that you're like looking for the stars and they're not there. But okay.
And then you had another poem too. Did you want to share that or not?
Yeah. So okay, this is funny. So I've been having a crazy month myself because I've been working on the postcard poetry fest.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I haven't been doing many prompts, and I mean this was a quick poem too, so it'd probably be not as good. But I'm like, what can I do? Like, but I was in this trivia thing, and like one of the answers I said kind of funny was kind of Jack the Ripper, and October's coming up, and like it's the time for me to start thinking about like I guess October with being Halloween and everything. And I don't know, like Jack Ripper falls in that kind of category, like the weirdness of October for some reason. But I also was thinking like as a reporter, I was just thinking kind of the reporter's mindset, like, not many reporters, you like, for an example, like when I was a reporter, like there was a murder that happened that, they were like, I was sent out to kind of go to the scene, but I didn't really see anything, which was good. But like in the 1800s, unfortunately, I think probably reporters saw more than they wanted to see, in these kind of things. So that's kind of what I was thinking about, like, kind of being a reporter in the 1800s when Jack the Ripper was going on. And, it's something like very small and kind of, it's just something that came to mind quickly. It's probably not well written, but we'll just give it a whirl.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Okay. If you scroll down, like, because I put on the same page for you.
Yeah, I see it. I have it here.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Newspaper reporter's nightmare. The black ink spot widened on my column. A ghastly scene. A girl's bloody legs open. Her organs carefully plucked from her womb. She was the unfortunate, lost in the city shadows. I was among the men who hurried into the pub's alley to vomit the contents of my breakfast.
Oh, wow. Yikes. that actually kind of, that's a great, I'm glad you shared that poem though, because I wanted to let everybody know, we are on, for Halloween, Halloween's on a Sunday, but we're not going to do a Sunday show. But the night before, we're going to do it on Saturday, and I want to have a creepy Halloween show. And so we have a poet, Ernest Gilbert, who has a book called Caligula'n, which is a book of all of like creepy Halloween type poems, like, scary mythology and things like that. And then I want the open lines to be creepy poems too. So we can have a whole creepy poem, scary Halloween night, the night before Halloween to kick it off. So if anybody, if you have like a month and a half or something, or almost 2 months to get your poems ready. So I wanted to remind people of that. That's a great reminder. Thanks, Angela.
Did I lose you?
Oh, I think I froze. But you can hear me, right? Well, I think maybe we lost Angela, but yeah, I don't know what happened there. But yeah, I'm still here, hopefully. So Caligula'n with Ernest Gilbert is going to be that Saturday. Is this off? Saturday, October 30th. We're going to have a Halloween show. So get some creepy poems. You have a month or two to write a creepy poem. Okay, next up. Okay, we have a bunch of people who are new and trying to call in here. We have a 253 number. Patrick Donahue. I just waved back to Patrick O'Donohue. Oh, that might be a Colette, actually. Actually, let me call up that person right now and see if that is Colette, because it's Colette O'Donohue over here. See if we can get connected, because I was going to read that poem next. Let's see. If it doesn't work, I'll read it. It says Patrick, who I think is Colette, isn't online. So I'll try again in a little bit, because if we can get you on, I want to make sure we get you actually on. Let's see. I'm double checking to make sure the stream is working still. Okay, it is. Yes, I'm still here. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Instead, let's go to Carla Schwartz. Then we'll go Julian. We'll do Carla Schwartz, then Julian Matthews. And then we'll do this 253 number. The 253 number who just called, I haven't reminded everybody, but there is a delay. So when I call you, you'll be live on the air, but it'll be like in the future. So hang up or mute your stream and just talk to me over the phone when I call you, or else it'll be confusing. And you have to have your poem with you. Also, because that delay, you won't be able to read it on the screen either. So have the poem ready when I call you. And I'll call you after we talk to Carla and Julian, so maybe about 10 minutes or so. But let's call up Carla first. Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing today, Carla?
I'm doing very well. Back on the lake. Happy to be here.
Oh, good. How did you handle the all the rain and stuff that was going your way?
It worked out okay. The first one was Henri, and then the next one was Ida, right?
Uh-huh.
And Ida didn't do too much for us, too many bad things, which was good, but for us. But Henri gave us a lot of wind and rain, but no, we didn't lose power and we didn't lose any boats or anything, so it was good.
Well, that's great to hear.
Relatively,
yeah,
relatively good.
So
Yeah.
what do you want to share tonight?
Okay, so I had thought about writing something that starts 100 years ago, but I really couldn't. But I have a poem that was recently published in Ibbotson Street. So it's called Marlborough, Summer 1968.
Great, I'll put it up on the screen. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Great.
do you want to say anything about it to start with, or just jump in?
Well, it has a focus on my great aunt who actually did start her life more than 100 years ago. But that's beside the point. And it takes place in Marlborough, Vermont, actually. And it has a epigraph from The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov, and that goes, "Life has gone by as if I never lived." One of the Casals summers, a sizzling cicada year, my mother started a pop-up art gallery in an old barn in Marlborough. Before the internet, before the gas crisis, back when long-distance calling cost something, she put it together, rented an old farmhouse for us, a long white attitude thing with a wrap-around porch, and shared the rental of the barn down the road with a summer theater company. The gallery centerpiece was a bronze bust of Casals, but most of the rest of the art belonged to my mother. Once summer began, we piled into the new Plymouth station wagon, stuffed to the roof with paintings. For a few weeks before camp started, we'd hang around the gallery during play rehearsals, the importance of being earnest, and soon mouth the lines along with the actors until we knew all the words, the pauses, and the laugh spots without really understanding the meaning. I hated the sleepaway camp my mother sent us to that summer. I liked the crafts, but not the campers. I molded clay into elephants and embroidered a turtle onto green felt, stuffed it with cotton, and stitched it closed. Soon, I acquired a fever so fierce my mother had to come and take me home early. 2 days in Vermont, and the fever broke. I ran through the overgrown grass and returned to the barn, the mouthing, the pauses, first the misanthrope, then the cherry orchard. The next week, a new relative, my mother's Tante Margaret, visited us from Peru, where she ended up in 1939 after her ship was permitted to land. She brought us ponchos and woven bags made from llama wool. Proudly, she told me that when she was young, she and Grandma had servants to cook meals and others to unroll their stockings at night. I didn't wear stockings yet, didn't understand that when you flee for your life, those might be the things you miss.
Oh, great poem. I love that turn at the ending. That was Marlborough Summer 1968. And that was from, it was published in, you can see it there, Ibbotson Street, this summer's issue. Can you explain a little bit about that magazine? What do you know about it? I know that it's based in the Northeast, the New England.
Somerville, Massachusetts. I'm going to see if I can find my copies. Yeah, here it is. So it's based, this was number 49, the issue. Mm-hmm. And it's they actually they make a beautiful cover, which I can't share with you right now, but so they don't have a big online presence, although they do have a website. They publish twice a year, and on their cover today, it looks like they have a photograph of the Eiffel Tower, and then it says Marge Piercy, Jennifer Barber, Mary Butchinser, Bodwell, Ted Kuzer, and Keith Tornheim, and more on the front. So it's like a bunch of, people that are published in there. And they're out of Somerville. And, it's sometimes they put 2 poems on a page, so they kind of squeeze things in. Mm-hmm. But, there are some very good poems in there, and I enjoy submitting there and having a poem published there every once in a while.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I'm so glad you could share that poem and also the press. It's always really fun to share other presses on the show. It's nice to show off those. Thanks, Carla.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim, for everything. Bye-bye.
Yep. Good night. It was Carla Schwartz. Let's see. Okay, so we will... Oh, maybe there are... Okay. So, like I said, we're going to call up Julian Matthews next. Then we'll try these first-time callers. So be ready, your first-time callers. We have 2 O'Donohues sometimes, which I think might be the same person. The odds of there being 2 O'Donohues listening right now are pretty low, I think. So I think it's probably the same person. But we'll do that, and we'll do the 253 number after Julian Matthews. So be ready. Let's call up Julian right now. Hey, Julian, how you doing today?
Hi.
Let's see, I hear you, but I don't have any video yet if you want to come in.
Okay.
Here you go, I think. There you are.
Yeah.
Good to see you. So how are things going there today?
Okay.
And what was it that you wanted to share?
A poet's response.
Okay, let me...
I wrote about, it's called Offset Patacron Jumping Man.
Hang on a second. Let me try to find it. Okay. I see it now. The whole... the fact that you submitted in August was confusing me. I forget that, August was only a couple days away, or days before. Okay, so explain about... This was a good poem. Explain what this was about.
So we've had a change of government, 2 parties trying to control the government, and the party that we kicked out 3 years ago has taken control of the government, and it's graft tainted. So we have a new prime minister. Mm-hmm. So this poem is about the change that happened, but writing according to a sport that's popular here called sepak takraw.
Yeah, that was interesting to read about too. Another thing that I didn't know anything about, and I should say that you're in Malaysia, for people who don't know, aren't regular watchers and don't know. Yeah. So this is the new Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Yeah.
So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I just there are 2 words here that are in Malay. One is sepak takraw, which is kind of like a volleyball, but usually mainly using feet. And another word is kaki ayam, which literally means chicken feet, but actually implies bare feet. Mm-hmm. So this is called of sepak takraw and jumping men. Once in the heat of the East Coast, in a field where the grass had turned brown, I came upon a group of men, some in rolled up pants, some in sarongs hitched up to their thighs, and knotted in between their legs. They were barefooted. Slippers appeared hastily removed and flung in a pile. Bicycles were parked haphazardly nearby, as if the game began spontaneously. They were grown men, not children or teenagers, arranged in a circle, kicking and keeping a ball in the air. I knew this as sepak takraw, usually played in a court with a net, 3 players on either side. But this was like a hacky sack circle, only much larger and wider than usual, and the takraw was an odd size, appeared smaller, harder to kick accurately. I recall the dust of the mud-dried field kicking up in the midday sun, the sound of feet cracking against takraw, the shouts of mirth and cajoling as a loose ball was rescued before it hit the ground. Their acrobatics were a marvel to watch. I came closer when suddenly the ball came flying in my direction. I reached out and caught it. It was warm as if it had a heartbeat, a globe of tightly wound rattan with holes big enough to fit tiny fingers, like hands in a cookie jar. I flung it up high, clumsily, but not close enough. One of the older men rushed out to greet it, his back to the men, and in a swift jumping move, worthy of a World Cup player, kicked it overhead into the circle, and the game resumed in a beat, like a practice dance with shouts of yay. Some raised their hands in gestures of acknowledgement for my small contribution. And I, a city boy, a stranger, the other, now standing with folded arms, was in awe, admiration, and over the decades since, in bewilderment of these ball-juggling, jumping kaki ayam men, as if I could ever be a part of them, as if I should ever learn the rules of the game, as if I would ever soil my feet to keep their precious takraw in the air.
Yeah, that was a really good poem. Really interesting. Can you explain a little bit about that sport? Because it's not familiar to me, and I found it interesting looking up about it.
So it's a little like volleyball. It has a net and 3 players on the other side, and the ball is made of rattan usually, and they kick the ball across each other and score points. But they only mainly use their feet. Mm-hmm. They can also use their head and their shoulders, but not their hands.
Yeah.
So it's very acrobatic. Even from the service itself, it's a very acrobatic game, and it's a little bit like volleyball and a little bit like badminton.
Yeah, like soccer, volleyball, or something. It's I watched a video and it was impressive. I'm not good at kicking it. I'm not a soccer type, so I was very impressed. But great metaphor too for the situation there. Thanks so much for sharing that, Julian.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Yep. Have a good night. It's Julian Matthews with of Sepak Takraw and Jumping Men. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna call up. Let's try Colette O'Donoghue. See if we can get a connection this time. Here we go. Hey, Colette. I hear you. If you want to come in on video, you got to click the camera button. But otherwise, you're on.
Okay, it's Pada, not Colette.
Oh, okay. Well, your email said that, so.
Colette is Mrs. Pada.
Ah.
I see. And Pada, we're okay.
Yeah. So. You just lost video again. I don't know if you want to come back or not.
No.
But it's fine with just audio too if you want. There you come. Okay. And so you are in Ireland.
I'm in Ireland in County Wicklow.
And how are things going there? I think that with the COVID situation that Ireland's doing pretty well with the vaccinations all of a sudden, and everything's going to be opening up soon. Is that true? Does it feel good there?
Yes, everything's good with the jabs and everything.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad you could join us. It's pretty late there too. What did you want to share? Hello?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I'm hearing everything twice.
Oh yeah, turn off the stream because where you're watching it on YouTube or whatever it is. Turn that off, or at least mute it so that we just have the phone call.
Okay.
Because otherwise, they're like 30 seconds apart, so it gets confusing. Is it good now?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Timothy.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's like an old-time radio show. So,
Yeah.
So what did you want to share? Take a Walk on the Wild Side is the poem you sent, and you mentioned it was in the Irish Times, I think.
It was. Will I read it for you now?
Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to say anything to introduce it, or do you want to just jump right in?
Yeah, it's It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Take a walk on the wild side. Dogs, like time and tide, wait for no man or woman or virus. But this dog was waiting for me, and I couldn't say no. So check glasses, willows, poo bags, collar. Lead away, Macduff. Late, thank God, the misanthropist's delight. We saw a trailer out to sea, lights as beguiling, as lonesome as a funeral song. We heard and vaguely saw a swan, followed by another swan, flying, barely able to know if that raw asthmatic sound was from beak or wing. A robin, more trusting than brave, sang us the sweetest song, even song. Another bird, even more startled than us, with his helicopter wings, took flight. Far above us all, a jet plane, warm framed in the twilight, its jet trail rendered sweet by the fading sunlight, red and as beautiful as a comet's tail. Was it merely this, or every single thing gone before, or the horror of now that sank me to my knees?
Excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. It was Take a Walk on the Wild Side, and Peter O'Donoghue. And it mentions you're the co-editor of PB Magazine and have 2 books of poetry out, The Death of Poetry from PB Press and Jewel from Salmon Poetry 2012. Do you want to... you were the person who had the comment about class in Ireland. And I notice your book here is The Death of Poetry. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'm just kind of curious, what you were getting at with that comment and if that has anything to do with the death of poetry.
Yes, my book, The Death of Poetry, is completely about class, the way working class voices are more or less obscured in Ireland. I don't know what it's like in America, but poetry in Ireland is definitely a middle class sport. And if you look at any mainstream magazine or any competition winners, they're all of an ilk.
Mm-hmm.
They all have these little touch words and touch points and anchors that dictate that they are of a certain ilk, and it's all very cozy and very comfortable, and they don't really want any outsiders, any people with vernacular language or other reference points to join in.
Mm-hmm. And do you try to reverse that with PB Press?
Definitely. That was the whole premise of PB Press, was to create a platform that was open to everybody. We read blind,
mm-hmm.
and it's amazing when you read blind what a cross section of the public you get. Like, we've always had gender balance. We encompass all, because at the end of the day, anybody can write a poem. It's the quality of the poetry, not the quality of the person. We choose poems, not people.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have, I think, really leveled the playing field. But perversely, we've been really eschewed by the poetry establishment because we've done this. We also acknowledge receipt of poems within 48 hours, and we give a decision within 7 days, which is unprecedented here. I don't know what it's like in America, but here you can wait months for a reply.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that you seem very similar to Rattle over there until you got to the
very good, yes.
Until you got to the response time, which we cannot keep up with that. We used to be really quick, but we've sort of lost that ability gradually over the years. So it is a few months.
You probably get a lot more submissions than we do.
Yeah, but it is interesting though, because we're and I'm sorry you can't see my picture. I'm trying to turn my camera back on. It froze. But anyway, yeah, Rattle has very much the same mindset and the same I don't know, like way that it's not really within the mainstream of poetry, which is always true too. Like we have like the second most number of subscribers and like the most web traffic, like people actually reading it. But as far as like all the awards and things go, we never win any. And occasionally we're in, I think we're ranked like, 25th of the magazines that get in the best American poetry and things like that. But we have, among the most readers. So we're always really happy with that. And sounds like you're doing a similar thing over there in Ireland, which is great to hear.
Well, we're trying to, we're surviving against the odds, but kind of not being included is grist to our mill and keeps us going. Maybe if we had been incorporated into the mainstream, we'd have given up.
Yeah.
It's almost because they won't let us that we keep going. It's great in a way. And funnily enough, Rattle, I only heard of through, you obviously know Billy Collins.
Yeah.
He said you are his favourite magazine.
Oh, did he? Oh, that's always cool to hear.
Oh, God, he did, yeah. He's always gone on about Rattle. And I thought, well, if Billy Collins likes Rattle, they must be pretty good.
Well, I should have him on the Rattlecast. I keep meaning to ask, but I feel like he's so big and he has his own thing that I don't know if he'd want to, but maybe I should ask him.
I think he would, because honestly, I don't know if you I follow Billy Collins on Facebook, and he does regular kind of readings.
Yeah, I watch those regularly. I really enjoy
plugging
them.
Rattle.
Yeah,
always saying I get Rattle. I subscribe to Rattle. Rattle is my favourite magazine. So I'm sure he'd be delighted, because he seemed to be pretty generous like that. He's one of the few that is generous, that has made it, but is still kind of the people a bit,
Yeah, he definitely is, which is why he has that weekly poetry show that he does, which I just love to watch too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining, calling in, and sharing that. And everybody will have to check out PB Magazine in Ireland that Peter O'Donoghue and his wife Colette run. Thanks so much for joining us, Peter.
We're the best.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Yep,
bye.
That was Peter O'Donoghue with, let's see. So Nivi can come back. But let's call up. So Nivi, we'll get to you next. But I said I would do this this mystery phone number and see who that is next. So we'll do the 253 number. I should put Billy on the show. Let's see.
Hello, it's Alan.
Yeah, I hear myself in the background, so just mute that, and then you'll be live on the air.
You're muted.
Okay, perfect. Who am I talking to?
This is Alan Harvey.
Great. I have your poem right here, Geronimo Reduced to a Print. And what do you, where are you calling from, first of all, I should ask, because you're a first-time caller.
Tacoma, Washington.
Excellent. And what did you want to share today?
I'd like to read that poem. And is it possible to show the picture of the Warhol?
Yeah, I definitely can. I'll be very careful not to show your phone number, but I'll show the picture too. Okay.
Okay.
So this is the photograph that you're talking about, that the poem is about. So everyone sees it at home right now. Can you explain what we're looking at?
This was from a discussion at our adult nurture class about, it came out of a lot of things. And I was doing some reading on brain research, and to try to bring that into this discussion, I'd have to talk about brain research for 10 minutes. And I thought, why don't I just fold it into a poem? Okay. And you have Andy Warhol, of course, was a white man, and his audience he's selling to is white. and they're exploiting, an indigenous American, Geronimo.
Yeah.
So it was pulling in a lot of different concepts.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, why don't you go ahead and read it? I have it up on screen for everybody to read along as you do.
Okay. This is called Geronimo Reduced to a Print. Power is not a white construct. The left brain creates it. Whites have just effectively learned how to use it. Asexual albino Warhola worshipped celebrity and power. If he hadn't been born, the left brain would have invented him. The brain's right hemisphere looks for the grand overview, how the entire subject fits into an overall scheme of things. The brain's left hemisphere reduces to known pigeonholes. Seeking structure and power, the right brain mute, left speaks up. Geronimo was a heroic and fearless savage. Who fought with murder and bloodlust. One of the last the Indian chiefs, his death opened the West for settlers. Perfectly sealed in his neat clay pot, reputation bonded to American mythology, oh so typically left-brained, and oh so white manifest destiny. Reduced to 2 dimensions, shrunken to a simple tale, 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue. A saggy old man is viewed by whites. The mute right brain wants to know where the ferocity and wanton drive came from. Was he a naturally born savage killer? Why fight the armies of Mexico and America? A young medicine man from a nomadic tribe marries a girl of his people when he was 17. Goiasla and Alopa had 3 children, all killed by the Mexican army in a raid. Geronimo fought for his people, was a heroic leader filled with courage, able to see the greater picture of his people being exterminated. Andy Warhol's left hemisphere creates a 2-dimensional image of an Indian boogeyman and savage broken old chief. White power is secure. Geronimo is reduced to a print.
Interesting poem. I'm going to have to, dripping with sarcasm. Appreciate that one. Geronimo reduced to a print.
I wish I had said ahead of time, the things in quotation marks are not my beliefs. They're the historic stereotype of the savage American. And of course, that's totally 2-dimensional if there's any fact to it. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was pretty clear in the poem. Thanks for sharing that. And I find that right brain and left brain thing very interesting too. The book, The Master and His Emissary, that Ian McGilchrist book, I think is so relevant to poetry. I mean, my belief is that that poetry is the right brain and the left brain talking to each other for the first time. That's kind of one definition of poetry in my book. So the right brain, left brain split is very interesting, that holistic view versus that linguistic focused view. So interesting to hear that in a poem.
And The Master and His Emissary was the book I was just finishing when I wrote this.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can kind of tell. I mean, I highly recommend it. It's a very thick book, but I highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in that concept and where the creativity might come from, which is, I think that feeling of having the top of your head taken off is actually the feeling of your right brain and left brain coming to coherence. And that's sort of my pet theory, I guess you could say. But a really interesting poem, and thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Tim. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Yeah, so that was Alan Harvey with Geronimo Reduced to a Print. Let's see, do we have anybody? Oh, Mike Bales. Mike Bales might be the last caller. I have to make sure I get everybody. Okay, that's... Okay. Oh, and then... Carlton Johnson, too, has a poem. And Nivedita Karthik, too. So we're going to fill up the show. It's going to be a definitely jam-packed show. Not short like I thought it might be. Let me read... I'll read... This is what I'll do. I'll read... Yeah. So I'll read... I'll read this Carlton Johnson poem, Morning Swim, and then I will call up Nivedita to make sure she gets here. I think she's like between meetings at work, and then we will go to Mike Bales, and that'll be probably the end of the show. So this is Carlton Johnson's poem. Did he include a explanation? Open mic submission for 9/5. Let's see. Oh, here it is. The poem is known as a terminal poem, in which you take a well-known poem and then write your own poem, but keep the same end words of each line. This poem is based on Morning Swim by Maxine Kumin. And so here we go. This is Morning Swim, Carlton Johnson. And he called it a terminal poem, which is something I hadn't heard of before. So this will be interesting. And let's see. The same end words of each line. So this has the same end words as Maxine Kumin's poem, Morning Swim. Here we go. Into my universe, the birds do come. They tweet and chirp wherefrom. They have no need to be nude. Feathers flutter with solitude. The sky is ceiling, the ground, the floor, the home is balanced on a breath of air. With sandals, towel, shorts of blue cloth, I amble to my pool, the waters of growth. I set the towel on wooden pegs. I enter this cool water, calms my legs. Divider and divided, I take a breath of clear blue sky. With commanding strokes, I tame the waves that call forth my name like a fish out of water. I swim, not as graceful as the notes of a hymn, and yet as the birds above do chirp, I beat the measure of my swim with steadfast feet. With each and every stroke I swam out, the hymn forms bubbles in my mouth. In this space I was weightless as I fell through the transoms of this watery well, and there I did float in this tiny sea as I let loose the grace that swam with me. Into my empty head there come a cotton beach, a dock wherefrom... Oh, wait, no, I think this is notes to the earlier draft. So, that was Carlton Johnson with Morning Swim. And I do believe it ended there with I let loose the grace that swam with me. Really, really nice poem there, Carlton. It makes me want to go back, and everybody should go and look at that Maxine Kumin poem, Morning Swim. Maybe I could read that. Let's see. Maxine Kumin, Morning Swim. If I can find a version online, I'll share it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, because it's short. I was thinking it was a 3-pager, so I didn't have time, but we can share this. This is Morning Swim by Maxine Kumin, so we can compare the two now. Here you go. This is the original, and Carlton's was an end-terminal poem. Morning Swim, and this is from courtesy of LOC.gov programs, the Library of Congress, that is. Morning Swim. Into my empty head there come a cotton beach, a dock wherefrom I set out, oily and nude through mist in chilly solitude. There was no line, no roof, nor floor to tell the water from the air. Night fog thick as terry cloth closed me in its fuzzy growth. I hung my bathrobe on 2 pegs. I took the lake between my legs. Invaded and invader I went overhand in that flat sky. Fish twitched beneath me, quick and tame. In their green zone they sang my name, and in the rhythm of the swim I hummed a 2/4 time slow hymn. I hummed Abide With Me. The beat rose in the fine thrash of my feet, rose in the bubbles I put out slantwise, trailing through my mouth. My bones drank water. Water fell through all my doors. I was the well that fed the lake that met me, my sea, in which I sang Abide With Me. And that is Maxine Kumin's poem. So that was the inspiration for Carlton's poem, both entitled Morning Swim. Carlton was an end-terminal, an interesting form. And for more on Maxine Kumin, we interviewed her in Rattle number 20, which is still available for purchase if anybody's interested. I think it was Maxine Kumin and Colette Inez in that issue. Okay, let's call up Nivedita, and hopefully Nivedita's good. And then we'll call up Mike Bales after that.
Hello.
Hey, Nivedita, how you doing today?
Hey, Tim, I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. Let's see. Let me get you there. Um, are you calling from work?
No, actually, we're still in work from home here, so I'm still at home.
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
just at home, so
Uh-huh. So what did you want to share with us tonight?
as usual, I have both the prompt poem and the new story poem, so whichever one you have ready first, I
Okay,
can do
well,
it.
I pulled up the news one first, which sounds like a fun one. So this is again from
Again,
Sky
continuing,
News. Yeah.
just like last time, continuing with the theme of cows. So,
So do you want to say what it's about, and I'll put the picture up.
so basically in Switzerland, this thing happens every year where the cows are taken to higher alpine pastures during summer because the grass is greener on that side.
Uh-huh.
And then they sort of walk down into town, and then there's a whole cow parade that happens in, I think, 2 or 3 towns in Switzerland. And then this time, what apparently happened was some of the cows got stuck up there and were unable to come down, so they had to airlift about 10 or 15 cows
Oh
in a
wow,
helicopter down.
wow! Look at that. I mean, I wonder what the cow is thinking.
According to the farmer whose cows were airlifted, they were like, oh, they seemed fine. We were watching them the whole entire time, and they were just like sort of enjoying the ride and the scenic beauty of the place or something like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
it's not like I was really minded it at all.
yeah. They look very calm. They don't look upset at all. Like they look much less upset than I would be if I was hoisted from a helicopter being flown down a mountain. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. It looks totally calm. It's like, oh, I'm just chilling up here. Nothing strange. And you're just walking around.
And
Look at that.
I don't have to walk so much with it. I get a lift where I want to go. So win-win situation all around, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's hear the poem you have. This is how you move cows.
This is how you move cows. Look now, there's this cow you see. She goes by Bess. And let me tell you, she's gotten herself into one frightful mess. High up the alpine slopes, she did go munching on some grass. And now that summer's done, she can't come down, the poor lass. She's not alone, mind you. My friends have got some cow too, stuck high up in the path, unable to so much as move. Wouldn't it be lovely if they grew wings and flew right back down to home sweet home in time for the parade of the moors? But now there's this way you see of bringing them down, back from the slopes and into the town. These special cows are taking the scenic route back, admiring the sights from high above, along with Propeller Jack. Who's Propeller Jack? Well, I'm glad you asked. He's the best pilot to get you out of trouble fast. And so he took his copter up the slopes and brought down the cows with harnesses and ropes. So, do you think Bess and the others learned their lesson well, and that this time next year they'll be ready? Ready to walk on their own from their alpine dell back to their hometown, slow and steady? P.S. Highly doubtful.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up the free ride either. That was fun. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then the other one was the prompt.
So this is more in the style of an older 18th, early 19th century poem, based on Percy Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. It could be set in any century that you wanted to, because it's about the beach and the waves, but I sort of wrote it in that style. And I think back then, because they didn't know so much about what was going on beneath the ocean and things like that, this is probably what they would have thought. So that was my reasoning behind this prompt poem.
Very interesting. Well, let's hear this one.
Ode to the mighty waves. O wild bubbly wave, you whose foamy jaws caress, you whose secrets we all wish we knew, so that we may receive mighty Neptune's bless. Green and turquoise and white and fathomless blue, your calmness belies the churning wrath of your attack, but in the blink of an eye you show your colors true, of the deepest blue and frothy white and darkest black, till like dandelion seeds tossed by the wild, wild breeze, to calmer shores we all went our way back, and from afar we gazed till your fury does freeze, and wisdom prevails and your gentle soul beams, once more charming us right to our jellied knees. O mighty blue waves, the cause of countless screams of joy and sorrow, and the star of many, many dreams.
Oh, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And a different style than you usually do. That's cool. Ode to the Mighty Waves. Thanks, Nivedita.
I sort of went with the Ode to the West Wind by Shelley and took it from there.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks for sharing that, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Tim. Have a nice evening.
Yep, bye.
Bye.
That was Nivedita Karthik, of course, with Ode to the Mighty Waves and the Moo poem. And I still, I guess it's one of those days. The camera gremlin is back for my second backup camera. I can't, and actually I've let's see. Well, I don't think I'm calling anybody else. That I think Mike Bales is gonna be the last caller anyway, and he does phones, so it doesn't matter. Let's call up Mike Bales, but I couldn't figure out what the problem was. Okay, Mike Bales. Let's see what he's got for us. Oh, and Ted Guevara sent one I could read too. Oh, and Vicky Miko.
Hello.
Hey.
I'll move away from the laptop. It's easier than muting you, I think.
Okay, sounds good, Mike. So how you doing tonight?
Pretty good. You're my second reading today, believe it or not.
Excellent. Where was your first?
Downtown Rock Island, the Midwest Writing Center, the main resource for writers here.
Oh, wow.
A coffee shop called Roz Talks, partner to have
was
an event where...
Yeah, was that in person or was that over like Skype or something?
It is in person. It's outdoor, though.
Oh,
Roz
very
Talks
nice.
is a coffee shop. And they had an event where one poet would be paired with another, and they'd read for a total of 15 minutes. Then bands would play. Then there'd be another pair of poets, that kind of thing. Roz Talks is probably the best place in the Quad Cities for poets to read their poems.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. So what is it that you want to share today?
The first poem is kind of a Poets Respond poem. It was like a few weeks ago. I don't know if it's still going on.
Yeah, whatever you want. I think I see a bunch of these. Oh yeah, so I have two. You have two, right?
Yeah, it's Pine Cones on the Mantle. I was a kid in Minnesota, and I happened to hear there's a fire in the Superior Forest up there. So I wrote a poem about that, and it has more to do with my childhood, actually, than it does with the forest fire. I wanted to do a forest fire poem kind of a little bit differently than others.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So this is called
go ahead.
Pine Cones on the Mantle. I changed the title.
Okay.
Pinewood Cones on the Mantle. The greenwood fire ghosts a ragged landscape at dusk, vestiges of wild taken in firestorms. Questions are asked if what withers will spring forth anew. When I was young, stories once stirred in my family's summer cottage of a thick forest to the north where roads would end. My mother kept giant pine cones on the mantle above the fireplace. She told stories of Anna, her friend who lived in Germany, and I thought the petrified forest. She said her friend would come, but she never did. Beyond shadows cast by glass towers in Minneapolis, farms and resorts rose from the land as we basked in time spent in Horseshoe Lake. My barefoot cousin talked about the fish she never caught, and without a net, she faked a card trick while my mother watched and my father was away. When summer winds sung ballads of Babe the Blue Ox, who with each step created a lake, and Paul Bunyan could fell a tree with the swing of an axe, the forests were never spent.
Oh, very interesting poem, and I can relate being up here. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Oh yeah.
And
Sure.
what is the other poem that you wanted to share?
The second one was the prompt. I forget the term for the words, but where items kind of created from like two different things, and there's a word for them, like sport,
the
that kind of thing.
Portmanteau.
Right. And this is about a friend who's partnered me, wants me to write poems about his paintings. I did one, and it's part of a display this one day. And this is called Realizations of 4 a.m. My friend, the painter, couldn't sleep. He went to his studio to paint images, consuming his dreams. With little more than a spork, he ate pasta heated in a microwave. He layered love on canvas with little more than a brush and a palette of colors. Strokes of greens and black textured, a rabbit hidden in context of a garden. Hidden meanings he intended to be uncovered by those who would take a second look at the space next to a blush of crimson strokes, now embellished by dawn. Sunlight spilled over into sky, a cloudless canvas, a day to be created, but his passion was spent. He grabbed his pillow, lay on worn green carpeting, and crashed to embrace his visions. He figured a late brunch would do after the world outside his window had already risen.
Oh, that was a good one. Thanks for sharing that. Realizations of 4 a.m. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. It's always nice to be on. First
Yeah.
day I think I ever did 2 readings in a day.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever done that myself, but glad you could. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Good night. Of course, that was Mike Bales, and you can look up his book with Suitcase and Bag, which he has listed down here in his footer. There's Mike Bales with 2 poems, Realizations of 4 a.m. and the other one. Okay, let's see. So we're out of callers here, but we did have some people who want me to read stuff. So Lisa Gibson asked if I would read this. This is Heart Aflame. We have a few poems I'm going to read from. Actually, the inbox is pretty full with people, but I'm going to pick a few at least and read a few. Heart Aflame. This is Lisa Gibson. Here we go. And she asked, all I have to do is ask if you'd like me to read a poem, and I can read, if we have a little bit of time, I'll read any poems that you'd like me to read for you to join them into the Rattlecast broadcast. This is Lisa Gibson with Heart Aflame. The sky shifted from azure to cobalt while we laid in the embers of me. You warmed yourself by the light, preening in the ashes of my love. Little regard to the fire consuming me, I sweep the soot from the rooms of my heart. As you pontificate about your dreams, they are little origami birds whose wings are signed, folding in upon themselves over and over. We're all living among burnt landscapes. I can be who you want me to be, continually setting myself aflame to give you light to bask in. I don't want your souvenirs of love, tiny paper birds that will never know flight. A very interesting metaphor. That was Heart Aflame by Lisa Gibson. I love the line about the preening in the ashes of my love. Very interesting. Good poem. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. And let's see, who else wanted me to share? Nate Jacobs has this poem. This is his prompt poem. So here we go. I think I'm gonna read a bunch of these. I'm kind of having fun. I'm not in a super rush. I don't want to get back to reading submissions. Not that I don't love reading submissions, but I like the break. So this is a caveman awakens. Let me see if I can expand it a little bit. Okay. A caveman. So he says, I took my poem way back beyond a mere 100 years to a caveman in love, suddenly loquacious and capable of a sonnet. So that's very interesting. This was kind of the prompt, which was a poem set back in history. A caveman awakens to being the only one fully possessed of language. Consider this, my lonely verbal state, descended like a million inky bats, from stars above or from the deep, perhaps the words seeped up, how to communicate with fellow beings who do not demonstrate grasp of sound beyond the ughs and acts we've spoken since we first escaped the slag. This gift of tongues alone I navigate. But oh, the words I'd loose on my sweet gook. Were she to understand them, she would find her knees made of weak, her primate ears unstuck, her Stone Age mind drawn to the heavens high. But I alone am cursed with words, such luck, so little use of sweetness, and for light. That was great. It's hard not to laugh. The idea of the only man, it's almost like a Twilight Zone episode. The only man, the only caveman who can speak would be a sort of weird kind of, like the guy who loved reading so much, but then he broke his reading glasses. Let's see. So here, let me do Vicky Miko's poem real quick. This is, as always, Vicky has some visuals to go with it. This is the Mustang Tarot card. And I'll put that on the screen here. This is the Mustang Tarot card. And it's a picture of a Mustang here. Very interesting as always. Maybe I'll read to make sure I get the words right. I'll read the actual text. Your mane to tail, a fierce internal stream, never cowering from a headwind, never withering when you tell yourself to listen. And then there's this beautiful picture of the Mustang running through the nighttime. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Vicky. It's always a pleasure to share your poems. And Ted Guevara. Let's see. So Ted says, I go back to ancient Greece when people depended on gods and goddesses to aid them on their daily grind. Helping mothers give birth was always a cautious task. Then, as it is now, all the complications, such as breech, remain the same. My poem predates the cesarean section, which came not much later, 715 BC. Wow, really interesting, in that civilization. It was then a practice to avoid the taboo of burying a woman with a child. My poem here hopefully sheds light on how buoyant we are to always crave for air. I never heard that. That's really interesting. So here's Ted Guevara's poem, First Hospital on Earth. First hospital on Earth. Among shadowy trees nestled the Greek temple. Its dedication was to bear and sustain life, and all else, towels, hot water, air, our midwife to assist the newborn, not necessarily divine or royalty. In fact, he was a farmer's son. The mother due was 18 days late. May they be humbled, but wanting the best of prenatal care in 858 BC. Just the coolness of the room made the farmer happy. He thought no sweat would come profusely down the wife's body, and it would be blessed and touched by Artemis. He and the mortal alms seen in the room were the best of health insurance. But no, all of temple became anguish upon seeing feet of the infant coming out first. Aphrodite nearly fainted. She turned to the god of birth, Artemis, and asked what procedure can be taken for the baby to swig its first air. Artemis looked at the farmer and said, "Time has not bestowed such measure upon us. Therefore you must choose your wife or the gamble of your son's breath to life." The farmer rose in glee, proclaiming he has a son. Then he jumped to his wife's crest and began easing the boy, hand over hand, wiggling limb after limb, like what the farmer would do if he was at home. Wow, that was an interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Ted Guevara with First Hospital on Earth. A little frightening there. I got to read more about that. I never knew that. Okay. I think we're going to have to call it a night this time. It's getting pretty late. Okay. So I'm going to try to find the SciKu really quick. So there was some interesting discussion about the SciKu because I posted it on my Facebook page. And it was this article from the University of Kent. And here we go. This is the article that inspired my little SciKu this week. Research finally reveals ancient universal equation for the shape of an egg. And so an egg is, it's an ellipsoid shape and not a perfect ellipse. It's asymmetric on one side. And this has to do with making sure the egg doesn't roll out of the nest. And so if you roll an egg across the counter, it'll turn around in a circle and end up pretty much where it came. And the more of a asymmetry in the egg shape, the smaller the circle it will roll in. So that's one of several factors. And apparently there's some more, like birds that are better flyers and more streamlined aerodynamically, tend to have thinner, more elliptical eggs to squeeze them into their organs more as they're developing inside the bird. And so there are other things like that. And it's been an interesting mystery for science for a long time, how this whole bird thing comes together. There's a lot of evolutionary biology going on. And these researchers at Kent School of Biosciences found the equation, or they developed the equation for this egg and how an egg shape is made. And so they have, I'll put the equations down here in the article. Pretty simple. Y equals plus or minus b over the square root of L squared minus 4x squared over L squared plus 8wx plus 4w squared times p to the x, whatever that means. And that is the formula that governs the shape of an egg. And for the first time, they're able to fit every different type of egg into one formula, which has implications for a whole bunch of things, including aerodynamics and submarines and farming and all sorts of things. So that was just an interesting article that caught my eye, because eggs are always an interesting example of evolution. And so my SciKu for this week was right here. A robin's egg rolling around the shape of perfection. A robin's egg rolling around the shape of perfection. And that is your SciKu for today, to remind everybody that there's all sorts of things you can write poems about. And for next week, the prompt is going to be, write a poem that contains an anagram. An anagram is created by rearranging the letters of a certain word or phrase to make another word or phrase. For example, an anagram of anagram is nag a ram. Bonus points if the title of your poem is part of the anagram. So that is your prompt for next week, to write a poem with anagrams in it, or at least one. Which reminds me of my favorite book, Lori Moore's Anagrams. I just love that novel, where the people in it shift around like anagrams. So each character sort of shifts places, and you get sort of personality into a different role as the chapters move forward. Really fascinating book. Anyway, that is next week's prompt. Write a poem that contains an anagram. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Vince Gotera. Vince, his newest book is The Coolest Month, which is a book of prompt poems. It's a play on words for the cruelest month. So April is the cruelest month, like T.S. Eliot said. But to Vince, April is the coolest month because for the last 10 years, he's been doing a poem a day based on prompts. And so he has a poem for each day of April in his book, The Coolest Month. He's also, for 16 years, was the editor of North American Review, which is one of the, I think maybe the oldest literary magazine in the United States. It's like 200 years old. And he was the editor of that for a long time. So I think we'll talk some editing and what goes into putting a journal together, because he has a lot of experience with that. We'll also talk about prompts, because obviously he loves those. We'll talk about a whole bunch of other things. That's going to be Rattlecast number 110 with Vince Gotera, Sunday, September 12th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, the regular time. And we will see you then. In the meantime, have a good rest of your week. Good night.